Welcome. My name is Laura Smales. I'm the Assistant Director at Ventureprise, and we are hosting NC Idea team, Chelsea and Amy. They will introduce themselves in just a moment. Thanks everyone for attending. What we wanted to do is really get a little bit more in depth. I think most of you attended the info session that they had a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully you've already looked over the application and have some specific questions. And this is where we want to get a little bit more in depth on those types of things. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Amy and Chelsea and let them take it. But thanks so much for joining us for a little bit, NC Idea team. We always enjoy our partnership, and I will give you the reins from now.
Great, thanks, Laura. Chelsea, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hey, everybody. My name is Chelsea Caughlin. I am a program support manager with NC Idea. So I work with Amy supporting our direct entrepreneur grant program. So Seed and Micro, we're going to be talking about today, plus doing some community engagement with our kind of alumni companies. So all of our past grant winners.
Thanks. And hi, everyone. I am Amy Bastian, Director at NC Idea. I oversee our grants to entrepreneurs, Micro and Seed, which we're going to talk about today. So I will go ahead and get started. And I know that Laura said that most of you have been to the webinar. So this will be a review. I'm not doing the full webinar, so don't worry. Just kind of the highlights, just in case. I know there's a lot of information in that webinar, so maybe we'll sink in again, hearing it twice, or for people who weren't able to attend. So I'm going to go ahead and, oh, I can't, screen sharing is not enabled, Laura. See. Yep, great. Can you see the PowerPoint? Thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. All right. So I think probably most of you know us, but again, NC Idea is an independent private foundation, really with a mission to empower North Carolinians to achieve their entrepreneurial potential. We do this through competitive grants and programs, direct to entrepreneurs as well as to organizations. And we support and leverage a network of strategic partners like Ventureprise. As Laura said, Ventureprise, Devin and Laura have been great partners for us. Just to let you know, if you've been to our website, you know that we have a variety, again, of grants and programs. Today, we're specifically talking and answering questions about Micro and Seed. And just to recap, these are grants, they're non-dilutive, and they're supporting North Carolina founders leading early stage growth-oriented companies, again, with a sustainable competitive advantage. So if you don't know already, our applications are open. They are due March 1st, and you can only submit one application per grant cycle, and that is either to Seed or to Micro. And we are planning on awarding about 15 Micro, those $10,000 grants, and about 6 Seed grants. The Micros will be awarded late April, and the Seed grants will be announced and awarded in mid-May. And again, we just want to make this really clear so that these grants are specifically targeted at companies that are headquartered in and that conduct a majority of their corporate operations in North Carolina. One of the things that you'll see on the application this time is if all the founders, and it's fine if you're a solo founder, but if all the founders are not in North Carolina, to kind of just give us more information why you consider yourself a North Carolina company. And you know, one of the things we also want to make clear is what companies are out of scope, and maybe there'll be some questions about that today. So you know, we mentioned earlier, they're growth-oriented companies. So they're companies, though, that are growth-oriented, but really have a high capitalization requirements and a long runway to commercialization. Pharma is the one that we give examples to. We don't see how our grants can actually move a business forward on their own. So consulting practices or agencies, training companies, distributors, franchises, resellers, nonprofits, and the other list. Again, we're looking for companies to have an innovative product or innovative business model that maybe don't have other paths to funding that some of these other options do, and can also have an impact on the North Carolina economy, either through creating jobs or through revenues, which impacts tax revenue. So this is, again, a reference. I'm not going to go through every single point of this, but just to know that the eligibility guidelines, it's not just a series of checkboxes. Like if I check every one of these, I'm definitely Micro, definitely Seed. There is kind of subjectivity to some of these, but just in general, we say that micro companies, while they may love $50,000, they're really not yet at that point of having proof of concept. There's something about their idea, their business model that they still need to prove out to know if they can effectively deploy $50,000, if they were to get that to scale their company. So really it's maybe they have a prototype and they need to make a first production run, and try and see if they can sell their first items. They need to kind of pour that into marketing because they're not really sure what their marketing messaging is or who their early adopters are. And there may be traction, there may be, some sales, some revenue, some users, but at micro, oftentimes there's more momentum. So the founder's making things happen. They're part of Ventureprise. They're building their first prototype. They are working on an SBIR grant. For seed, for the $50,000, there should be some proof of concept. Not that the business model or even the business may not change during the next few years. And there should be some indication of market traction. It could be revenue, it could be unpaid users, it could be partners. Again, so some indication that the market is ready and interested in the product. And again, for both of them, there should really be clear use of funds and milestones over the grant period. For micro, that's to validate something about the business, and for seed, that's to begin to scale. Both should be on the path, though at different stages in that path, to be a multi-million-dollar company, employ 50 people or 50 employees or more, or be investable. We don't have a crystal ball we can look in to know exactly where a company is going to be in 5 to 7 years or 3 to 5 years. But that's kind of when a company and founder is planning out their time frame and their business model and their financials, kind of that 5 to 7 versus the 3 to 5 year time frame. And definitely a full-time founder. For seed, there needs to be a founder who, if they're not already full-time when they're applying, that if they receive the grant, they are planning on going full-time. And micro, if the business progresses, if they're able to validate what they're looking to validate with the 10,000, that within a year-ish of the grant, that at least one founder is planning to go full-time. And then there's some requirements around revenue and institutional investment. Good, real quick program details. Again, micro is $10,000, the seed is $50,000. One change from half cycles. So micro used to be you got the full 10,000 initially, and the micro is over 4 tranche periods. Excuse me, seeds over 4 tranche periods. So seeds stayed the same, but micro, now that we have programming, it's $7,500. Will be as soon as the grant agreement signed, $7,500 to 75% of the grants will be distributed, and then basically it's kind of at the end of the programming, about 2 months after the first payment, then you'll get the remaining $2,500. And there is programming now. We can go into that more in Q&A. It's 8-week customer discovery. It's not every day. We know you may have other things, but it is group meetings once a week, and then every other week or so, meetings one-on-one with staff or maybe advisors. This is really to help companies have a cohort and support along the way, and really be more effectively able to use that use of funds to validate what they're looking to validate. And then we also have things like Mentor Madness, where you get to have an entire day of meeting with a number of different advisors in short meetings. And again, check-ins with staff. So really getting started, it is a thorough application. It takes time to fill out. So if you haven't taken a look at it or haven't started to fill it out, please start today. The topics cover all aspects of your business, and every question that's asked is important. And finally, be honest, none of the applicants are perfect. We really want to understand where your business and your team is today and why now is the time for either the micro grant or the seed grant. And really that the grant is critical to the next step that your company needs to take. So these are the next steps. I can just, I covered them in the earlier webinar, but basically go to ncidea.org. We have a lot of resources. So again, the recording of the webinar, FAQs, the templates for both micro and seed. You can schedule virtual office hours. We have them all throughout the month of February, and just a lot about the program details and eligibility. And also you can check out our past grant recipients under our company's link. So that's just a quick overview, but I think we want to spend the bulk of the time getting your questions. So I'll stop sharing and we can transition to questions.
And I'll go ahead and just sort of start this, and feel free to go ahead. Many of you have already emailed me some questions, so I'll go ahead and start with these. Feel free to put them in the chat or the Q&A, either whichever one's easiest for you. And then I just saw where I do have the ability to turn you on if you want to ask your question. So feel free to raise your hand or say, hey, I'd like to jump on. but I do want to reinforce start now. There are so many resources. Ventureprise is here to help you. And then you have office hours to take advantage of with NC Idea team, but start now. It doesn't have to be perfect now, but go through the application and jot down the information that you have so you see what you need to collect in the next week or so. Then you put it together, send it to somebody to review, redo it. Like, that's the proper way. You don't want to do this the week before. I cannot stress that enough. I know that everything
I
is—
can't stress it enough either. I really can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
It is the most important aspect of this, I think. I see so many people that are so excited that attend now, and then a week before, I'll get contacted and say, hey, I'm getting ready to throw it together. Could you look at it? And I'm just, yeah, but I'm like, no, like, you should have, let's start now and do little sections. But take a small bit at a time. But that's just one of the biggest things. And again, the office hours at NC Idea, you have them. You have them now to ask questions, but they are some of the most user-friendly. I'll answer your questions. So I definitely want to stress that. I do want to have a little bit more detail. One of the biggest questions that I get, and I've already received it a few times, is how do we define the right time? I do know, I will preface this by saying, you can always do a one-on-one and ask and give your specific question. But Chelsea, you go ahead and take that.
Yeah, so Amy, feel free to jump in, but really the time is now if you feel like either the $10,000 or $50,000 is ready to move your business forward in some way. If that money is going to help build some traction, then choosing which application is right for you, but the time is now. And in the Q&A, Matt had also followed that up with, do we have a chance for another application if we didn't get the first grant? Absolutely. So many of our winners apply 2, even 3 times before they receive a grant. And part of the application process is you're going to receive feedback from the reviewers. So if you're even not sure if right now is the time, but it could be the time, taking the time to fill out the application and then you're going to receive feedback may make you even better suited to win a grant in the fall or even next spring.
Yeah, I mean, everything that Chelsea said. And I mean, if we were doing this in person, if we were down at Ventureprise and doing it, we would have a local grant recipient come. And one of the things that I feel like maybe it holds more weight when someone who's been through it says it versus what I'm going to say is that it's worth it even if you don't get the grant. That the feedback is so critical to really, thinking about what's strong about the business, what's not, what could be, so we hear that repeatedly. It's almost worth the effort just to get the feedback, and not even there's the feedback, but then it really makes you think about these different parts of your business. Can you explain what the problem is? Can you explain what your market is? Describe your customer discovery. Well, maybe you haven't really done it, or you're not exactly sure what that means, and you need to go out and be like, oh, I've done surveys, but haven't done any interviews. So when you have the time to go through it, it actually makes you think. It's big sections of a business plan. It's just in text format. So we hear that repeatedly. And I think going back to, is it time? We say for both micro and seed is, we have a section that you have the impact, you have milestones, and you have use of funds. So the impact is kind of like, what would be the goals? Like, what would this do for your company? So for you to be able to really be clear, like, this will help me do X, Y, and Z to validate this about my business model. Are you clear on that? Is it, well, I could do this, or I could do that, or I could do this, or I could do that? So are you clear? Are you focused? And then, what are the milestones you're going to be tracking to see if you're going to achieve that goal? And then what are the use of funds? And kind of the same thing with seed, like 6 months out, do you envision, is your company ready to deploy that $50,000 to hit enough milestones where you'll attract outside investment? Or maybe it's to get an SBIR grant, or is it to start having enough revenue where you can extend your runway? So how does it extend the runway of your business? And then again, then that kind of milestones support that, and then the use of funds support the milestone. So it's, yeah.
And I will say this, I'm a former seed grant I applied for the seed grant years ago before when I had my startup, and it truly was, we did it twice. From the first time to the second time, leaps and bounds. It taught me so much of what we needed to get done. The feedback was tremendous in terms of, look at this. It was some outside language that we hadn't really heard. So it was really something to focus. So that's what I tell people, this isn't something, what you're putting together for this, you can use over and over again for other grant possibilities, for SBIR, this is where we get focused. And so as a former, not only do I now review them, but I completed it back in the day, but it was one of the biggest learning experiences that I had. And it actually made me very, methodical in what we were going to do in next steps and how to spend our time daily. As a startup, you're either, you're sometimes doing it on the side, but it shows you where you need to concentrate first. So to sum up that, go for it. We usually say try to go for it, but ask. Feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to reach out to Chelsea or Amy. Like, we'll answer those if you want to get a little bit more specific about where your situation is. But if you have those defined milestones and there's something that's really going to impact, this 10,000 will help me get answers for this and this. I will definitely, that's definitely something that you can say.
Yeah.
So,
and one of the things, and again, I was the caveat, because is that as long as the company falls within like the main eligibility criteria, again, you have to be a North Carolina company. It's not for nonprofits. It's not for, small businesses or smaller businesses, which are fantastic if you put, I'm having a successful small business, but again, it's not how our grants are targeted. And that, again, looking at the founder requirements in that time frame, if you want to have this business, but you never plan on going full time and you just want to hire employees, that's not a fit. So as long as those are taken care of, yeah.
Perfect. And then we just had a question. So you talked about the 8-week course that you did. So there's plenty, I see on here, plenty of Ventureprise launch former participants. So I'm sure it's a completely different program. So I'm going to let you two cover this, but sort of, you're not going to have to repeat what you've done with us.
Yeah. Chelsea, you want to take that? Because we're both involved, but Chelsea works really closely with John Austin, who's running that. So she can handle that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not as familiar with what Ventureprise has to offer, but I can speak to what our micro programming looks like. So it is 8 weeks with John Austin, one of the directors at NC Idea. And it starts with customer discovery, but it's going to walk you through fundraising, your go-to-market strategy, and it's weekly kind of seminars and then weekly check-ins directly with John. And we also run a similar program. It's our labs program that has no funding attached to it. And we have quite a few companies who have gone through labs and then apply for a micro grant. So they're doing even NC Idea programming twice. And the feedback that we have received has been that your business is in a completely different place now than it was the first time you went through the programming. So even if there's repeated kind of content, the exercises are still incredibly helpful because you're working with a different business at a different point in time. So we've heard from multiple companies. We just had 2 who were, labs participants in the spring and micro grant winners in the fall. And both said that having the programming the second time around was almost as valuable as the $10,000 itself.
And I will go ahead and insert, so we would follow, so where Ventureprise launch would follow in is almost like the lab. So we really focus in on the value prop in your market. And it sounds like when you get those micro, it's more about those next steps. So it's a perfect flow. And you can always, and we teach this at Ventureprise launch, we want you to continue this customer discovery. So this is just a more refined way. We never want you to stop after the 30 interviews that you do with us. So it's sort of this flow. It's not repeat programming. We've had people go through Ventureprise launch twice. You can do what it is what you make it. So if you have a next level that you're trying to test, that's a perfect way to get on there to do that. So
and the other thing I'd add real quickly is the way that John is doing this now is the content typically is like record, you watch the video, so if it's on fundraising, MVP, it's a 5 to 10 minute video that he's done. So you watch it in advance. So if you've already kind of been through that, you know, so he said people who've been through the labs program, you don't need to watch like that video is the same as the presentation. You know, if you've been through Ventureprise, maybe you'll want to watch it, but really the weekly meetings are designed so it's like John's like, I don't want to lecture. Everyone's Zoom fatigued out. So, you know, it's what questions do you have from the content? Like, have you deployed it? And it's breakout rooms so you actually get to know your cohort better. Mm-hmm. So it's like it's a support group of like, yeah, I found these interviews really challenging this week. Or, you know, we had the MVP talk with, you know, how to do your MVP, but I think what we built is not an MVP. I think, you know, how do we kind of get what we envisioned back to an MVP stage? So the idea is that they're more interactive and it's not just you come and hear John lecture every week. And, you know, for some, it's more product launch than customer discovery, though customer discovery is always important. So the goal is to tailor as much as possible to the group.
No, that's perfect. I am really excited that you guys did that. So I think that's a great pipeline. I think that this is the critical time where everyone needs that guidance, and it is what you make it. So as much as you put into it, that's a lot of feedback that we get is they see that, you know, you have a ton of teams that are, you know, you can tell what they're putting into it, and, you know, it's just reaching out. We're here. Just let us know what we can do. So, so we're going to go on to the next question that's been asked. And I'm always asked this, so I'm going to smile when I say this, but how important is the video? We have people that are video challenged. So they always want to know what it should contain. How much effort should I put into this? So I think we all three could probably answer this because we're all reviewers, but I will let you two take it first.
Yeah, and I will say, I'm going to be 100% honest. If you ask 2 or 3 reviewers, you may get 2 or 3 different answers. You know, I'm going to be 100% honest. But we went and talked to a group at Elevate out at Venture Asheville, and Jeff Caughlin was one of our reviewers. He'd actually applied in the past, went through labs, and he's like, video. Like for him, it's really important. I know for others, it's not. So what I say is focus on your application. Have a really strong application. You know, even if you had a really effective video, but if you spend all your time in a rush to the application, you're not going to move forward. Have a solid application. I also don't recommend spending much money on the video. It's not supposed to be professional lighting. It can be, you know, sometimes it's kind of the founder telling their story. Sometimes it's showing the product. If it's a physical product, I don't have a product, but if I invented iPhone, which you can't see either with my background. You know, so I would say if it adds value, and again, it's no more than 3 minutes. I focus on the application first. Maybe you have a video, maybe it kind of explains the company. It could be a marketing video, but again, it should add value. And that's where, if you have, again, a consumer product is great. Sometimes you can show it. You can just get, you know, clothing. If it's, you know, a piece of equipment, you can show how it's used, and that's really great. But my focus on have a solid application. If you have an idea for the video, if you have something you can repurpose, but if it's also, if it's software, maybe it's something that kind of takes us through and shows us like, oh, wow, they actually have a real functioning like app. Like this is something that can be used, or this is the vision for it. If it's micro, like maybe they've mocked it up using one of the many, many online tools, if it adds value. So that's what I say. What do you say, Laura?
I'm going to exactly second it. And I would say if it's something different, do not repeat what's in your application. If there's something to physically show that will enhance it, if you need to tell a quick background story, absolutely, but do not repeat things that are in your application, because a lot of people will check that video off first and then read, but it really needs to be that bonus. I don't want to see the repeat. I want to know something that you could not get in that you're dying to tell and you think is really, really important, then do it. But do not sit and just talk until go down like my problem statement. Do a demo, show your product. But Chelsea, what do you say as well?
I would fully agree with the two of you. Yeah, as Amy said, it does not need to be production quality. We are not looking for you to spend thousands of dollars to try to win thousands of dollars, right? So
that's a really good point.
Absolutely include, but if that's the piece of the application that is stressing you out to the point where you can't fill out the rest of it, as Amy said, focus on kind of answering those questions to the best of your ability and give the kind of clearest, most concise answers and to represent your business.
Yeah. And one thing I'd say is that for what I found is for reviewers who really like the video, I mean, people will watch the video, but I feel like the reviewers who get the most out of it, or people when they're watching it, they tend to watch it first, and we actually have it, you know, kind of up at the top. So keep that in mind. If, you know, if you're like, oh, we're going to go into real technical aspects, something that, you know, will supplement, you know, something on like further in the application, it could just really end up confusing. So again, keep that in mind that most reviewers, it's going to be maybe once after they get through like your name and, you know, corporation date and stuff like that, they're going to watch the video. So it should be, again, that high level, you know, adding something. If it's going to confuse someone, be like, I can't at all make sense of this because I haven't read the rest of the application, that may not be, again, adding the value.
Yeah. And it is such a subjective. So it's almost, I usually tell people, go through your application, whatever you've had to cut out, whatever you weren't able to put in. If you're able to tell that story, then take the time to do that. But again, application first, like, and not a lot of money. You know, you can put together, there's plenty of free video applications where you can throw some things together. Absolutely. So perfect. Another question that I constantly get that I love because this is what we do, but what do you look for in like versus C versus micro, but the problem statement? You know, and you talked about that focus. So Amy, you know, if you can explain a little bit more, you know, what is the problem statement? It's not, and I can say this from a personal experience. When I first started my company, it was, oh, we're solving the water problem. No, we really weren't, but that was very general. So I try to use that as an example, but if you want to take a few steps forward and really talk about what a problem statement is.
Yeah, and definitely chime in, both of you as well. So in the problem statement, we're looking, and again, companies are, you know, at various points on their path. So, you know, we're probably going to maybe see some less specific, we're solving the water crisis problem, maybe on micro, like it, but the C point, you know, like a lot of it goes back to, if you've done customer discovery, you know, you've actually really kind of heard from hopefully early adopters what the problem is. So it may not be that, again, solving the water crisis, but it's that problem of people, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but like having really high water bills.
Nonprofits didn't have technology. That's how we ended up going there.
Yeah. Or, you know, if consumers are having problems with leaky faucets and it's costing them, like they're really having, and there's just, for whatever reason, nothing out there that they know how to use. And this is a daily problem for them because they use their faucets every day. So it's understanding how, like, kind of, and if you've done more customer discovery, ideally you'll be able to really hone in on the problem. And what thing we say is, we're looking for a problem that requires not a vitamin, but like a pain pill, or I don't know if it's a Tylenol versus a vitamin. So it's something where it's like, this is really something that that's enough of a problem that people are willing to pay for. And you may be early, so you may not know that you believe it, but it's something that's like specific where you can say, I have clarity on the problem, and that's how I know I believe my solution can solve that problem. Because if it's something as broad as water crisis, what is your product going to do to solve the water crisis? There's so many parts to that. So what part, and even if you have a vision to have a company or a nonprofit that is going to really focus many, many aspects of the water crisis, it's good to know your vision. Like, you want to grow a large company, but say you're really focused on these leaky faucets, and then from there, like, you know, you can speak to what solution are you trying out now that maybe you need to validate. So we do look for focus. We do look for an understanding of, and to be honest, when we read the problem statement, we want to be clear. What is the problem? And that's one of the things we say, you know, after reading it, it's like, well, they're doing something with water, versus like, oh, they found out that the problem is that these leaky faucets cost, you know, I don't know, the average North Carolina homeowner, $10,000 a year, and people are being kicked out of their homes so they can't pay their water bill. Clearly, that's not a real problem. But so we do look for specificity, focus, and then an indication that there's an understanding of the real customer problem. And it's not a problem that is a problem, say, for the founder, or like, this is a problem our company wants to solve. It really is, it's the problem that your potential customers and users have versus problems that you, and ideally you've done customer discovery to validate that.
And even just a little bit. So Chelsea, if you want to go through and talk about how does that problem solution, because they've talked about the solution. So we look for that fit, but again, there's a difference between micro and seed in the level. So Chelsea, if you want to cover that just a bit, to follow up on what Amy was describing.
Sure. So as Amy mentioned, that solution should be something that you have validated through customer discovery. If you're at the seed stage, you should be pretty clear on that problem and solution really go hand in hand, and it's something that your potential customer base needs. For micro, it could be that you've got an inkling that that's the case. It needs a little bit more customer discovery, and you have an idea for an MVP that could theoretically solve that problem. You might not be quite as far down the line. We talked about the fact that with the micro grant, not only are we hoping that, obviously we hope that your business is fabulously successful and you come up with a solution to a problem. But if you spend that $10,000 realizing that there isn't a problem, that's great too, because that has now saved you how much money, how much time as a founder to either pivot or realize that maybe there wasn't a problem there at all.
I think you just defined entrepreneurship. That's what I tell everybody. It's okay. It's okay to pivot. It's okay to turn. It doesn't mean failure. It does, that's not that.
And one thing I'd say is, the problem, this is kind of, why someone's, ready if things bear out to go all in, because it's a lot of work, a lot of time. It's a lot of tough choices on the path of entrepreneurship. But, if there's this is the problem, I've done some, but be honest to where you are in it. So it's been okay, this is the problem. I've observed it. I've had it. I've talked to some people. Maybe I've done some customer discovery, but I think I need to do more. This is what still I need to be honest about it through all the parts of the application. So, even around the problem, put it down for where you believe you are today. If you're I don't know, I don't exactly know how to explain this, or, I know I need to do a little bit more customer discovery, but I'm just going to put a lot of words in there and hopefully that'll sound, just be clear and say, this is where we are today. We think we need more clarity around, part of the problem statement, or we know that this we believe it's something that someone would take a Tylenol for, but maybe it's just something that they would take a vitamin for, that they don't need to basically solve that pain point right away. They could, if it's a little bit less, that's fine. So again, just be honest and be as clear as you can.
Perfect. And I'll go ahead and
talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to remind people to I have the list of questions that everyone sent in, which is great. But if you have questions that are coming up, do not hesitate to do the chat or the Q&A. I'm monitoring both. But again, you guys have set us up really well for some questions. So I wanted just to remind you, if there's any questions that have come up so far, let us know, but we still have some to get to. I'm sorry, Chelsea, go ahead and go with that thought.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Amy, do you want to talk a little bit about how each stage of the application is really about moving on to the next step in the application process, not winning a grant, and how they're, especially with seed, kind of the homework aspect that could be associated?
Sure. So yeah, there are different stages for micro and seed. So micro, there's the initial application, and then you move to then we have finalists, and there's an interview. And then from that interview, we select grant recipients. Seed has one extra stage. We have a semi-finalist stage. So we go from 150 to about 24 semi-finalists to about 10 to 12 finalists, and then about 6 grant recipients. So that initial application for both micro and seed, there are character count restrictions. So one, that's it's helpful for everybody. It's helpful for the reviewers. It's helpful for the companies, but it's also a way to kind of a reminder that this is our initial introduction to you. So this is a way for us to say, should we move this company forward to learn more? So, we tell our reviewers, for, information about market or about the technology. Like if you said you've developed this AI technology that can do X, Y, Z, initial application, we're trusting you. If you proceed, if you move to the next round, we'll check references, do a little bit more due diligence. But really for those initial applications, we take what's in there as, your best answers, that you're not trying to pull one over on us. So just know that it's not as though that this is our introduction to you. We want to find the companies that, again, have an innovative product, or maybe it's a business model that have that path to scalability within the timeframes that we talked about, and have a really clear, that the grants have a real clear impact now, not 6 months from now. You know, if a company is like, yeah, we're in research phase right now, and we could use your funding, but really it's going to be 2 or 3 years before we're, you know, commercialization. Whether it's this spring or next fall, maybe it doesn't really matter to the company that much. We want to find companies that are really ready for it. And so again, for the initial application, it's for us to kind of get excited about your idea, say, this team, and by team, it can be solo founder, it can be one person. So, you know, there's something, you know, we really like in this problem that seems like, you know, maybe it's when they've identified something, that an unmet need or a new way of solving a need that we've heard about. This market that they're planning on selling into, it's growing. That's really exciting. It's really quite a large market. You know, they have some momentum, they have some traction, they have a general sense right now, they're able to convey, you know, how they would use the funds and the impact this would have. Yeah, you know, they seem to have done some customer discovery. Let's move them forward to learn a little bit more. There are going to be questions, you know, for all the companies that we move forward, and micro and seed, but then that's where we get a little bit more in depth in the interviews and then due diligence for seed. So we say that one of the things we say is, you know, the goal of the initial application is not to, you know, win the grant, it's to advance to the next stage. And one of the examples that we give, it's kind of like when you're applying to a job, you know that when you send in your resume, you're not going to get the job just in that resume. It's to get you the interview. So kind of think of it that way. And you don't have to tell us everything about your company, you know, in that initial application. It's just answering the questions that are being asked. And then just going back to what we were talking about in the beginning about starting now. You know, you can have great idea, you can have a great market you're selling into, a great product, a great team. But if your application's rushed or it's not clear because you didn't have anybody review it to give you feedback, that's all we have initially. We don't tell the reviewers, they're not going off and doing outside research. So if those points that are really fabulous about your team and your idea aren't conveyed well in the application, you won't move forward.
No, that's great. So I'm going to follow up on, there was another question, and this was asked, what if I am a solopreneur? Do you want to see big teams? You know, do you include advisors? How do you balance that? So, and again, we can answer in terms of micro and seed. We can do like the 2 phases because they're very different, I believe, at some point.
Yeah, and actually I had this in my list of questions that we get a lot, you know. So yes, you can be a solo founder, but and that we ask about advisors, we ask about supporting communities, because, you know, if you are a solo founder, maybe it's you know, you have a full-time founder or just 2 part-time founders. We know at early stage, at micro, we look to see who you've been kind of connecting with. Maybe it's you're going to 1 million cups, maybe it's going to pitch breakfast, maybe it's having gone through Ventureprise. So it's who are you kind of building, and you know, who can, but at the seed level, and you may have advisors for micro, that's fantastic. And we want to know formal and informal. Definitely at the seed stage, you know, if you're a solo founder, or again, it's a really, really small team, then we look to see, okay, who are the supporting communities or the advisors that are filling in the gaps that the founders have because they're only 1 or 2 people, you know, to get them, to help them scale. You know, so if the use of funds is really, say, heavy on marketing, because say the 2 founder, you know, the solo founder for seed, that's not their area of expertise. They built this great product, they've done this customer discovery, but they need a lot of work on marketing, but they don't have that background. So how are they going to make sure that they use those $50,000 really effectively in marketing? Do they have an advisor who has that skill set? Are they part of an accelerator that is going to give support around that? So we really, those supporting communities and advisor questions, again, formal and informal, are really, really important. I'd say that for micro, it often indicates the momentum, since a lot of those early companies don't have traction. So how are they're meeting with the SB, you know, local small business center. They're, you know, attending, if they didn't go through Ventureprise, you know, they're going to maybe another accelerator, or that they signed up for SCORE to get a mentor. So it's kind of, you know, what are they doing to find out about entrepreneurship, to find out about starting a business? And for seed, it's often, you know, who are their supporting communities or advisors that are filling in the gaps in that skill set that really would be needed.
Chelsea, is there anything to add on that you've seen?
I think Amy has covered it.
Perfect. And then I will add on to that, that sort of goes into the milestones, where at micro, we don't look, you know, as a reviewer, but we say, you know, you don't have to have everything answered. It's okay, you know, we want you to be honest. And always, if you do put somebody down as an advisor, always make sure that they know that you're putting them down as an advisor. That's one little tidbit, but
thank you, Laura, for mentioning that. Yes, it's very important.
Give some examples for traction specifically. So, in micro, it could be you've looked, gone through an accelerator, or or Ventureprise or labs. But what are some other things, some people that maybe are just now hearing about all of these resources? What would be some other for micro for traction that you would be looking for?
Yeah, and I would say, and then there may be traction, but if we say momentum, basically when I say momentum, but yeah, it's what is the founder doing to move their business idea forward, and traction being like indicators from the market that there's a product market fit, which some of our micro companies have that, some don't. Maybe they have some users of their product, some don't at all. So what we're looking for is the steps, recent steps, I should say. It's not, oh, I did all this work 6 years ago and now I think I'm ready to pick it back up again. So kind of what has the founder or founders done, what have they done the last 3, 6, 12 months to move their business forward? So maybe it is, developing a prototype, like handmade prototype, or maybe it's, and then maybe they've been reaching out to, we have a number of companies in the textile or garment industry, and not all of them have production experience. Most of them don't. They've come across a problem. So they're like hand designed a prototype, and then they're finding people to actually make the first run. They've done a lot of research. They found out that how large the market is. Some of it is market research. So it's of kind of trying to find out and plug in the resources and the next steps in moving their business forward. And we are industry agnostic. So they're so varied. Again, it can be hemp. We have hemp fiber companies. We have, founders designing sportswear. No, they're not sportswear designers, but they've just seen a need. We definitely have, technology, B2B, B2C companies, consumer products. So, it's a number of our companies in consumer products, they have maybe an initial prototype and they've gotten some feedback, but they know they need to maybe modify that prototype, but they've actually have a prototype, they have a design for it. And they started to get some feedback. They're not ready to sell that one, so they need some funds. So it's really that, the founders, even if they're only part-time on it, that they are really moving the idea forward, trying to figure out what does this look like? But I'm all in on this idea. We want that if everything bears out, I'm all in. We sometimes get a question of, I've got 3 ideas. Which one should I apply for? And I'm like, okay, maybe you're not ready to apply, because what we want is, it's one thing if you're like, yeah, I mean, which is, no, it's like, this is something like, I know I need to there's more validation I need to do, maybe more customer discovery, but I really think there's something behind this one. This is, I'm able to validate, I'm looking to validate, this is something I could be ready to be 100% full-time on and put the effort in. I think actually could be that multi-million-dollar business, employ 50 people or more, or attract outside investment.
I always tell people it's what you want to do is tell the story, and they're looking at 50,000 for seed, 10,000, but what is going to accelerate you right now? Because they want to be a part, NC Idea wants to be a part of this initial jump. They want to be able for you to tell the story of, okay, I received $10,000 and here's what I've done with it. And you need to have some questions answered before that. So again, we'll go back to the very first thing that we all 3 talked about. Write some stuff down, have somebody review it, and then, okay, you're not too specific on here. Well, what else have you done? That's not really momentum. Let's talk about momentum in this way. Or add this, you've done this. I have a lot of people while I do reviews and I'm like, well, you went through customer discovery and you talked to 45 people. They're like, yeah, write that. That's momentum. You found out that this doesn't work, but this does. And those are stories that you want to hear, so I think those are perfect examples.
Yeah. And real quick, momentum doesn't always need forward movement in terms of business. So, we have, as we've talked about, companies apply many times. And then one of the questions is, ask, okay, if you applied before, what's changed? Yeah. And if you say, what I was doing 6 months ago was targeting, this type of customer, well, I actually found out that they don't have any interest in my product, but through additional customer discovery, I'm now focused on the product is really seems to solve a pain point for this different group. So that's fine. It may be that, you don't have any more market traction, but you actually have a lot more clarity on the problem solution fit. And that is definitely momentum, even though you may feel like, in a way I'm in the same place I was, what learnings have you been gaining?
Yep.
And it's just, you know, the progress. Absolutely. I mean, you know, when you get the funds, you can go through that way and get those.
Exactly. And I will just add a quick logistics point because I don't think we've mentioned this. On the seed and micro websites, there are templates of the applications so that you can work offline. So our application is in a portal. And while, yes, you can work in there and kind of save and go back in and edit things, we have found that especially when you're kind of bringing that application to people like Laura to say, hey, can you take a look at this for me? That working in that offline version is just much simpler. So I just want to throw that out there as a resource if you haven't found that yet.
And I have had the question, this will sort of, if you guys want to think about it for a moment, I'm going to ask what I haven't asked yet, or what anybody else hasn't asked yet, but who are your reviewers? Like, you know, who are they writing to? Do they have to be, in terms of explaining things, you know, how basic do you need, that people sort of want to know who they're writing to?
Yeah, so for micro and seed, we have different types of, well, for seed, we have staff reviews. So initially every review gets, every application gets 3 reviews, a staff, one of our MBA, or mostly MBA or graduate student fellows who will do due diligence later for the semifinalists, and then vetted, we call our reviewers, our external reviewers. These are investors, they're entrepreneurs, they are ecosystem partners like Laura and Devin, and subject matter experts. So we do try to match kind of the interest around business category with the type of business category of the business. It kind of all depends on the number of applicants we get in different business categories. But, and then for micro, the initial round is an outside reviewer and staff. We don't have graduate fellows. So, but the kind of the same type of background. Again, some investors, entrepreneurs, subject matter experts, and our ecosystem partners. What I'd say is, even if, again, we'll try to like match, you know, kind of the business category, like someone who knows B2B software or B2C software, consumer products, but they may not know your exact industry, you know, and they may not know your technology. So, you know, if your technology is really technical, we say, you know, you're describing it, if you're going to go pitch to an investor, they're probably not going to know. So really you have to be clear on the problem you're solving and your solution. Again, initially we trust you that the technology behind it is going to work. We'll vet that in later stages. So don't get super detailed on the technology. You know, we want to basically generally understand how the solution you're developing will solve the problem. And these are all reviewers who are vetted by us, and they want to. The thing is, they raise their hand each cycle. We don't make them. So if someone needs to sit a cycle, they want to find the best companies in terms of, you know, impact on the economy and the impact of the grant on the company at that time. So they're really motivated. They want to understand it. They are attentive. And we try not to give them too many reviews, you know, during the time period. So again, they're people who have seen applications before. They have worked with startups. They just may not know your business or technology, but they've seen business plans. They've even grown their own business.
So that, yeah, and that's sort of where I was trying to get. We always tell this too. When you're technical, if it's if the technical person is writing the application, you definitely need to have somebody review it to probably bring it down a level.
Or two.
Yes, because we don't need to, as reviewers, and I'll say this as a reviewer, and you both can follow up with this, but I'm not trying to figure out exactly how everything works. I want to know what problem you're solving, how your solution, your innovation, your business model, how that works. And, you know, and we're going to trust. And then in the interviews following up, we sort of ask a little bit more technical, you know, we can get that technical, but let's bring it down a few. If your technical person is writing, I understand your passion for that. And I love that about founders. I really, really enjoy innovation and learning about it. But when you only have a certain character account, it's, you know, we want to be able to figure out what you're trying to do. So I don't know if there's a follow-up with that, but I always get the technical, you know, issue.
Yeah, we ran into this with one of our labs companies actually just yesterday. We were running through an exercise with them. Being aware of vernacular that is specific to your industry, and knowing that, as Amy said, there's staff, there's MBA graduate fellows. So you might get one subject matter expert in those 3 reviews, and that's fantastic. fantastic. But if there are acronyms or certain terms that are very, very specific technically to your industry, make sure those are explained or spelled out. Don't assume that the acronym that you use every day in everyday life is something that kind of your average layperson is going to understand.
Yeah. Yes. And I love Laura's recommendation of having like a non-technical person review it. Like one of our applicants, and we've seen it, so BPM, it's not that uncommon, but it's business process management. I first thought, I was like, oh, beats per minute. This isn't the music. Like, it's not at all what it was. Yeah. So again, like BPM, like if you're in the field, but if you're not, if you come from more of a, consumer product, you may not know exactly. And then there are honestly some acronyms that are not specific. It's like in one industry they mean this and one in the other. And I do think it is really challenging for technical founders in general, because so much of, they can't imagine discussing their product or service or technology without getting super technical. Mm-hmm. So I agree, Laura, those specifically, definitely find a non-technical person to review.
And that's just, and again, we always appreciate your efforts, but I'm just going to say, let's take this out and let's describe this a little bit better. It's sort of that. And along with that, people get very nervous because there's a question on both applications, but about IP and defensibility. And people answer this differently every time. So maybe we can clear this up a little bit. So first part of this question for both of you, do you need IP? How important is that? Where is the status in both micro and seed? And then what is defensibility? What are you looking for in terms of that? If you don't have IP, there's also a factor of defensibility in the market. So I will let you both take this from there and sort of give a little context to that question.
Yeah. So the long story short is we do not require that you have IP. There are some businesses where it may never make sense for you to have IP. Amy, I will let you kind of take the defensibility part because
sure.
I think that's related.
Yeah. So, we want to know if you're planning on IP, if that's in your roadmap. So maybe micro, you don't have it, but you're planning on it. Let us know. I will say if you do have a patent, great. We're asked patent details. We want to know who owns the patent. We run into this where a patent is really critical to a business, but it's owned by a university and the company doesn't fully have the license yet. So we want to know, like, do you have rights, even if it's not, you don't own it, do you have rights to it? And then for the companies, what we mean by defensibility, so a patent can help you, defend your place in the market, absolutely. But, some of the companies that we're seeing, brand is really important. So, it might be that it's a brand play. And does the team, maybe it's the founder plus the advisors, do you believe that they have the ability to build a brand that kind of once it gains traction and gets a part of the market, it can actually defend it? Does there seem to be, does the founder understand that brand is going to be important? And that's fine. So it could also be first to market. So it could be that this is a newer market and that the reason you need the funds, say for seed, is that, you have some traction and you need the 50,000 right now because you can be one of the first people to market. And knowing that if you're one of the first ones to market and can really begin to scale and build your business soundly, then you'll be able to be one of the first movers. And again, you're just the brand that everybody goes to. You're the company that everybody goes to. Some do trade secrets, so it's not necessarily IP, but it's a trade secret. So it looks very different, but again, it can be a brand play. It can be first to market. It could be that the market is growing at a really exponential pace so that you believe that, and that you believe that you're differentiated enough and that that the level of effort of a competitor to match your differentiation, they just, it's going to be really challenging, whether it's because of expertise of the team, the technology. So it's, we just want to, if you are going to go all in on an idea, you should be thinking, how am I going, if I can even get the market share, how am I going to keep it? There should be something that you believe about your business. Again, first to market, IP, that you're building for brand, your vision for expanding out kind of the breadth of services of your companies that other people aren't doing. There should be something about it that you believe is going to allow you to scale, but we want to know what that is. And say if you're like, oh, well, this is, I know, a pet peeve for a lot of reviewers, and I'm going to get the math wrong on it, but if it's, like it's $1 trillion market, and if we can just get like 1% of that, it's, a really large company. So we say is nobody knows You know, I think it's John Austin's favorite thing of like, okay, the operating service or the mobile phone. Do you know the company that has 1% of the market? No, because it's, you know, maybe the smallest company has like 20%. You know, getting 1%, you're going to get shut out and you're not going to have that defensibility. So it's, and if you're not sure yet, you know, let us know, but you should have a sense of, and again, if it is around brand, and that's fine, because, you know, a lot of consumer products, it may be around brand and knowing your customers so well, and that you're able to leverage it and build this community that us understanding that tie.
No, that's perfect, because that's a great, and that just goes to when you do talk about market, and anybody that's on this call or will see this in replay, Ventureprise launch, that is what, when somebody asks you market size and you say, we just want 1% of a one, no. We want specifics, and that's what we help you. We help you do. So I do want to ask, since we're concluding here, I do want to ask you too, is there anything glaring that this audience did not ask, that I did not ask? Is there anything else that sort of stands out on any of the applications? Any final thoughts?
Sorry, I was just looking, I had to get back to you. I was just looking at my notes of FAQs. I think we covered most of the questions we get asked. The other thing is we get asked a lot about use of funds, like what can I use the funds for? So again, we have such a variety of companies applying. Mm-hmm. So again, the way we say to think about it is we want to know your overall goals for the grant. Like, what do you hope to achieve? And again, like why, and in this time period, why is it so important? And then, you know, the milestones that you'll be tracking to figure out if you're close to that, but then the use of funds to really support the overall goals of the grant. So, you know, if you really need to nail your marketing, you know, and figure out your customer discovery, but, you know, your use of funds is all around IP, you know, how is that, you know, so basically, how are you going to achieve those goals? They need to be aligned. You know, it's so varied, but prototype development, you know, marketing, which could be website development, it could be like A/B testing, it could be Google AdWords. There's some for legal. Pre-COVID, I mean, going to conferences to be able to talk to a lot of customers, or travel for business development. So those can look different now. Yeah, and so it really, and then especially for micro companies, sometimes there's more around customer discovery. Again, some of that was conference travel, going to a conference so that you have access to people who you really believe are your target market.
No, that's perfect. And that's a great summary. She is, they are diligently putting in their info in the chat. I will also email this to everyone. So I want to let everybody know that I'll follow up with an email. Real quick, I did want to do a mention, Ventureprise launch. We're taking applications right now. They close on the 10th. And this is that 6-week customer discovery where you sort of work through your problem solution. What are your value propositions? We help you get the answers for these applications. And our goal is to get you to micro and C. Those are our goals through our programming. That's why we work. That's one of the things, one of our initiatives as being an NC Idea ecosystem partner. But we are accepting applications. It's first class is on February 17th for us. And then we skip a week, and then it's the rest of the month of March. We conclude on the 31st of March. But if you guys want to give out the dates really quick again for the application cycle.
Sure, the application is open now and will close on March 1st, and those close at 5 p.m. on March 1st, and that is a hard deadline. So
don't mess with it.
We always, despite our best preaching, we always see a bunch of applications come in that last 24 hours. So just be aware of that 5 o'clock deadline so that you don't get stuck with an open application that you just missed submitting.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. I feel like we got a lot of in-depth questions answered, and I feel like this will really help a lot of applicants, and we look forward to a great grant cycle upcoming.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for your partnership always. Love coming to talk to Ventureprise.